Well, thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining me. My name is Paul Lytle, and this is The Art of the Ages, the podcast all about the hows and the whys of writing. So I thought we might do something a little bit more casual, more fun today. I have actually been, since episode one, been telling you that at some point I'm going to explain why this is called The Art of the Ages. And it's probably not what you're thinking. And so, if you've been listening for any period of time whatsoever, you know how much I love and admire J.R.R. Tolkien, and and especially when it comes to literary theory and writing and the importance of story. I think that his thoughts on fairy stories and other similar works is just critical for any modern writer to read and understand. And so the title of this podcast does not come from that at all. but but kind of one step removed. So this book that I have in my hand, if you are watching on the YouTube channel, then you see said book is a book, a mist book called the Book of Atrus. Now, this is actually a book based on the video game, on the game Myst, which, if if you're anywhere close to my age, you remember Myst. Myst was the biggest CD-ROM gaming sensation of the 90s, and it was just everywhere there for a while. And depending on who you ask is how well that game aged, I I happen to still love it quite a bit. But I was utterly fascinated by the game itself, and I came across this book at the bookstore one time, and I was actually drawn, not just because of the game that I just absolutely adored, but the cover, because this is and this being a podcast, you can't really experience the cover of this, but it's a really interesting publication. It's very, very cool the way they put this book together, and the hardcovers are cool in a different way, but still very, very cool. And I appreciate the effort that Hyperion went to into making these books. But and so I picked it up, and I absolutely fell in love with this book. And despite it being kind of a sequel of or a prequel of a video game, it is exceptional. And it's written by the two creators of the game, of the original Myst game, Rand and Robin Miller, who are brothers, and David Wingrove is appears to be the wordsmith who actually put all the plot together. And so why am I bringing up this this book that's based on a video game? Because it's clear, it's really clear in this book that the Millers had a great understanding of what Tolkien was talking about when he was talking about subcreation. And you get just a hint of it in the game itself. You know that Atrus, who's the father of the two main characters that aren't you in the game, if you haven't played it. If you haven't played it, there are not many characters. In fact, I think there are actually only three. Atrus and his two sons, and his two sons have found themselves trapped in books, and you must decide which of them is crazy and which of them is, safe to trust. And free the one that is the good guy, and not free the one that's the bad guy. That's kind of the point of the game. But you start digging into how this happened and what this is, and you find out that Atrus is able to write these books, and they essentially create worlds, and then you use linking books to go to these worlds, and you can actually be a part of them. This idea is really fleshed out in the book, which is a prequel, and it takes place before Mist, but it really starts fleshing that out, and especially the relationship between Atrus and Gen, his own father, who you meet in Riven, the second game. But the whole idea of this is that their race of people, the Dani, are able to do this, and they call it the art. And the worlds that they create, they call the ages. And there is one of the big conflicts in the book, the Book of Atrus, is Atrus's belief that essentially they are not creating, and I'm putting my words into Atrus's mouth, but they're not creating the way God creates. God creates ex nihilo. Atrus believes that they're modifying what's there, that these worlds exist, and they're exerting influence over them. Whereas Gen thinks that he is the creator of worlds. In essence, Gen believes that he's a god. And I don't think he ever actually says it like that. But that's what he believes, is that he is the god. He is the creator of worlds. Whereas Atrus has a better understanding that he is not the ultimate authority. And so when we go into Atrus's view of exactly what he's doing here, it lines up nearly exactly with Tolkien's ideas of subcreation, that we are, when we create, in our drive to create, is because we are made in the image of God, who is a creator God. But we are not creating like him. We are not creating out of nothing. We are instead creating in a creaturely way. We are not capital C creators. We are in fact sub-creators. The distinction is really important, and it actually plays out over and over again, really, in Atrus's family. And we see them constantly banging into this wall of, these are people with great power, and essentially, do you believe that these people on these worlds that you have written into existence are your own playthings, to do whatever you wish with? Or are they under your care? Are you the ultimate authority? Or is there another authority above you? And so that is the question that we have in the game Mist itself, and that's the not giving it away, but that is the question that the sons of Atrus have to struggle with. It's the same question that Gen before them struggled with. So this book actually it was one of the first fantasy books that I read. And I started Lord of the Rings before this. I'm trying to remember exactly when everything took place, but I certainly read Narnia when I was a kid, and I think I read The Hobbit before I read Mist. But this book, it really kind of set my imagination alight, because it was the first time I had really encountered a writer who was thinking deeply about writing and making that an element of the conflict and of the story. And those thoughts have just kind of stuck with me. And so when I finally did come much later in life, I'd say much later, a few years later in life, to Tolkien's On Fairy Stories, the idea, when Tolkien starts going into subcreation, it was a fertile ground for me, because this ground had already been kind of plowed up and such by the Millers in their Mist series. So the Millers did I think, if I'm remembering right, do the first 3 Mist games, and they did 3 novels. Of the 6 of those stories, the Book of Atrus is by far the best, and it's a great accomplishment, and it's one of those books that has just stuck with me, and so despite the fact that it's based on a video game, it is actually something I really recommend. But that's how we got to the title. I didn't want to name this this podcast like something weird and boring. Like, just basically SubCreation. It's a fantastic phrase for what we're talking about, but it's not that great of a podcast title. But the what the Millers are talking about is essentially the same thing. And so I took those terms from them and titled this "The Art of Ages." And so now how a podcast on writing and literary theory took its name from, well, essentially a video game. But for those of you who know me well, probably not all that surprised. That means, having dealt with that, I'm kind of excited. I really don't do New Year's resolutions, but I'm putting aside some time. I'm really trying to schedule out my week more and more, and so I'm putting aside more time for writing, and so I'm hoping that schedule sticks, and that I'm able to produce some good stuff here in the near future. And so, yeah, I'll probably tell you about that as we go, because a lot of what I'm talking about, especially like in the workshop episodes, are issues that I'm running into as a writer, as I'm working through my own stuff. And so we're probably going to be talking about some of the new stuff that I'm tackling here in the near future. So I'm really looking forward to that. So that's going to be it for us today. A little bit of a shorter episode, but I do hope that you enjoy it. We will be back, of course, next week. We do appreciate you tuning in. And until then, never, 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 never stop telling stories to one another. Have a great week.